in the back, or is the mic on? Can you hear me in the back? Just put your hands up if you can. Lovely. I don't know why people say this whole post-lunch session is the toughest. Normally the one before lunch is the toughest, right? Everyone's thinking about what are they going to be eating afterwards, etc. Hi, my name is Ashdin, doctor, and I am a habit coach. Normally when people introduce me as a motivational speaker, I say, not a motivational speaker, I'm an anti-motivational speaker. You're going to get zero motivation from me today because we're going to be talking about habits. And I think that habits are so important because if you don't focus on habits, what happens is that the change cannot take place in anything that we are doing, whether in our personal life or in the office, right? So the whole idea is how do we focus on the habits that are going to bring this change? And like you rightly said, as HR people, how many of us believe that culture is very important? Let's put our hands up. Culture is super important. Yeah, right? How much time do you all actually spend thinking about the culture? Quite a lot, right? Everyone wants to make a change but finds it extremely difficult to. So let's first understand this. And as HR professionals, all of you all, I believe, are the creators of culture. You all decide how this culture needs to be. I believe that you all are the custodians of culture. You all control it, you all manage it. But more importantly, and this is so critical, I feel that you all are the change makers of culture. You all are the ones who can decide where this culture needs to go. How do you want to make this change going ahead? So keep this in mind as we continue. Now, today your company needs you more than ever before. There are so many different kinds of people that are coming into the company. There's so much culture dilution that is taking place. And this is a word I hear very often when I talk to my clients. Culture dilution is taking place. We had this culture, now suddenly there's something else that's happening. Or there is culture stagnation that is taking place. We are not moving with the times. How do we move with the times, Ashdin? And these are the kinds of questions that people come and often ask me. So how do we do this? And as HR, we are the most important aspect of culture. So normally, when I talk about culture, this is the way that I like to define culture. I like to define culture in this broad sense, which is that you can think about it in 6 parts. One is the mission and vision of the company. We look at the mission, vision and say, this is the kind of culture that the company has. The second way is the style of the company. The physical look, feel of the products. You look at an Apple product and you say, this culture is very different from anything else, right? Then we have the decor of our offices. You enter an office and immediately you start seeing, this is like a fun culture. This is a very serious culture. Nobody's paid attention to the culture in this company. And you can tell these differences as soon as you enter an office. All of these are aspects of our culture. Most importantly, the systems and processes. Every time I'm invited to talk about something, especially in a company that is run by systems and processes, everyone's like, oh God, I can't make any change here. Life is so hard. Everything is system, process, system, process. What we have to understand is that systems and processes are also the habits that are there in a company. They're part of the culture of that company. And finally, there are the action habits that take place, all the unstructured, unconscious styles of working. When we say, "Arey yaar, wo bhej do na," unstructured way of working, right? "Arey, I'll send it to you tomorrow. You just make an excuse for me." Unstructured way of working. All of these things form a large part of our culture. And it's very important for us as HR to start looking out for these nuances. And finally are the thoughts and the belief systems that exist within an organization. Are we growing? Are we stagnating? Is the time good for us? All of these are important aspects of what we do in our culture, in our office. And like I said earlier on, how many believe that culture is hard to change? Almost every hand went up, right? Culture is very hard to change. Why is culture so difficult to change? And I'm sure you all have at some point of time tried to make a change in the company and it worked for exactly half a week and came back to normal, right? You got everybody to try and get excited about something and nothing changed. It gets very frustrating. When I talk to people, they're saying that, Ashdin, we're banging our head against the wall. We can't figure out what needs to be done. How can we change this? And there's one very simple reason why culture change is so hard. And this is it. That if you look at the mission vision of the company, very simple to change. You get the board together, you get the owner of the company together, and they can rewrite the mission vision Very simply, right? We've seen this happen so many times. You want to change the style of the company, get a new product designer to come in and completely revamp everything up. We've seen this happen with airlines. We've seen this happen so often in different companies. Just the product changes and you can say, culture has changed. It's a different style. It's a different company altogether. Then the decor, very simple. Just get an interior decorator to come, jazz it up, and the culture of that organization has slightly moved. Systems and processes, slightly more difficult to change. Don't you agree? Right? Everybody has to get into the process. All the managers have to get together and agree on something that they're doing. Far more difficult to change. However, the last two are what I have circled here. This is the hardest to change. The actions and the unstructured style. These are nothing but the habits of the organization. The unstructured way in which things work are the habits of the organization. The thought beliefs. Every time you walk around the corridors and you're discussing things with people, what are they thinking? All of these are the thought beliefs. These habits are very, very difficult to change. And that is the reason why we need to start focusing on our habits. So let's first understand what habits are. Okay? The way that I like to think about habits are, they are the conscious or subconscious actions or thoughts that happen at a set frequency of time. What do I mean by this? Normally when we think about habits, what do we think about? Brushing teeth, tying shoelaces, right? All of these things are habits that we think about. But our habits are also our thoughts. And this is something that we don't realize. Our thinking is also a habit. Right now, the way that you all are thinking about whatever is happening here is also a habit. You all have gotten into that loop. What is important for us is to recognize that these thought habits exist. Imagine every morning if you wake up, how many of us have multiple alarms? First of all, put your hands up. How many of us snooze, 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 snooze? That itself is a habit, firstly. Right? And then imagine you do snooze and say, oh my God, another day. Oh God, life sucks. Today is also going to suck. Guess what's going to happen? Today is going to suck. Right? It's a thought habit. And we don't realize that we are doing this all the time. All the time. What's critical is that your companies are doing this all the time as well. And it's important for us as HR professionals to realize that this is what's happening in our company. So, thoughts and actions. Examples of habitual actions. And you all are going to love this because you all know this is taking place in your company as well. Being tardy, never being on time. I once was working with a company where everyone came 1 hour late for all the meetings. Once they made me wait for 45 minutes, I got up and left. Then I realized that it is the owner of the company that comes late for everything. So as a result, everybody would come late for all the meetings after that. The tardiness was an important habit. Then being overworked. How many times do we hear, oh my God, we're overworked, we're overworked, we're overworked. Saying we're overworked is also a habit. Chronic firefighting, constantly trying to firefight. Doesn't this happen in our organizations? Right? We reach and again there's a fire on our table. Again I have to deal with all these issues. I have people coming and saying, Ashdin, I don't know what to do, no work gets done, we're only putting off fires. Nobody ever tries to figure out who's starting this fire in the first place. Right? We always try and solve for the fire and move away. This is a habit, chronic firefighting. Last minute panic. How many of us only get presentations done last minute panic, right? We have to work on this presentation. Oh no, in the morning we're sitting down and working. Rushing to work also is a habit. All of these things are habits. As soon as we realize this, our lives can change. Till this, we don't realize this. We'll say, life is going on, life is going on, life is going on. Look at the next ones. Examples of habitual thoughts. There is no money in the organization. Cash flow problem, cash flow problem, cash flow problem. Habitual thought. Recession is bad. Habitual thought. I don't have time. And the worst one according to me is not my problem. Do people say this in your organization? Not my problem. Right? It's not my problem. Let them deal with this. One of the worst habits, because that means nobody is taking ownership of what is happening in this organization. No one's taking ownership. So it's so critical to start realizing that these habits are there and are constantly infesting and replaying in our organization. So how do we start understanding these company habits? The first one is habits are passed on from one person to the other, from generation to generation, right? The old people who are in the company pass these habits on to the new people that come in. We often think, once we get some new blood into the organization, it will change. How many times have this meeting happened where we said new blood, and what has happened to the new blood? It has become exactly like the old blood, because habits pass from generation to generation. And more importantly, habits passed from designation to designation. We all instinctively understand that habits move from the boss down. Very simple, right? You see bosses doing something, you will also do the same thing. But it's interesting because habits also move down up. I was once working with a company where the salesman, the lowest person in the sales category, came back saying, no sales are happening, bad recession is going on, no one's buying our products. And he said it so often that the sales manager started saying this, the marketing manager started saying this, the CEO of the company started saying this, the board started saying this. And then they hired a new sales guy from another company, competitor's company. He came in, he heard this thing and said, what nonsense, we are making lots of sales, what are you all talking about? It's just that you all don't know what you all are saying, so nobody is buying you all. You can see how a habit moved up as well in the chain. We have to be constantly vigilant on the habits that are taking place both up and down. Making sense with me? Right? It's so critical, and you can start playing this back in your mind. These aha moments will happen saying that this is exactly what is happening in my organization. And if you want to make culture change, it starts with our habits. So there's no point just saying that, okay, fine, these habits are taking place. But let's understand, how do we actually start making these changes in our daily life? The first one is we have to identify the problem that is causing it, right? So very often we can't make culture change because we can't see the habit. It is so invisible to us. We don't even know it's taking place. What's happening is that we are part of the problem. Sometimes we need somebody external to come and say, guys, do you notice that this is taking place? Right? Like I was just working with a company in Bangkok, and they were like, Ashdin, we've been having this problem that we can't figure out. And in one day of dealing with the company, I said, have you all noticed that this is the kind of conversation that is taking place? And because they were so part of the conversation, they couldn't realize it. So we have to, as HR people, slowly take a step back and look at the organization from a different lens in order to identify what these habits are. The second part is to create an intention for this new habit. Why do I want to make this habit change? What is so important that if this habit change does not take place, something bad is going to happen in the company? It all starts with creating an intention for change. Right? If you want to learn yoga, you want to learn yoga just because you got a new pair of yoga pants, not a strong enough intention. You want to learn yoga because you want to become flexible, you want to sit on the floor, you want to do things that you could not earlier. Much stronger intention. So even in my organization, whenever people say, we need to make a change, always ask why, what is the key intention here, only then go about making that change. Otherwise it's not going to stick. Then what we do is, how do we actually start focusing on the habit itself? We first start by making it stupidly small. Okay, and I love this expression, stupidly small. What is stupidly small? That means you make the habit so tiny that you feel stupid not doing it. So if you want to get into the habit of yoga like we were just talking about, what would your stupidly small habit be? It's not about doing yoga for 1.5 hours every day. Just get into the pants. What I tell people is just roll out your yoga mat. Your habit is rolling out the yoga mat. Then at least you'll sit on it. Maybe once you've sat on it, you'll do one stretch like this. Maybe 4 Surya Namaskars will happen. Something will happen. But if you did not roll out that yoga mat, that something would also not happen. So make it as tiny as possible. The problem with our organizations is that we think that it has to be larger than life. Only if we present something this big will everybody be proud of it. But no change takes place when you do something so difficult. You have to start stupidly small. Then make it extremely easy for people to do. How do you make it extremely easy? You remove all the friction from the process. Imagine if you've taken that yoga mat and put it on top of a cupboard, and you need a footstool to go and get the yoga mat out every time. Very hard. have to make it extremely easy to do. The last part is begin at the top and the bottom. Normally you say, oh, from the top down, top down. Habits don't work like that. You have to go both ways and you have to attack it at all the levels. This is the way to start making changes in our culture using habits as the tool. Okay? And finally, and this is the most important, please make room for failure. How many times have you all tried to make a habit and failed, tried to make a habit and failed? In the same way, even in the organization, you will try to make a habit and fail, but the consistency is what is important. Can you continue pushing this forward? That is the key. So track the process, see what is not working, and keep making place for change. All right? Failure is important, and I think celebrating failure is an important habit that we all need to create in our organization. If we don't celebrate failure, what happens is that people get scared to talk up. Nothing new happens in our organization. An example from habits. So during the lockdown, I did a lot of work with Google Europe, Google Southeast Asia. And their brief to me was, Ashdin, we have done everything in our ability to help people work from home. They had given a budget of like a lakh or more to people to set up their home offices, get standing desks, get a printer, get a new fancy laptop, everything had happened. And then all the people were coming and complaining that we are burning out. We can't work anymore. We want to quit. And they couldn't figure out what was going on. And this is a beautiful example of how our personal habits float into our professional habits. We bring our work home, and our home we bring to work. So what we realized was that there was no stopping, there was no segregation between where the home ended and where the office started for these people. And as a result, they were constantly feeling overworked, burnt out, no break. They would wake up in the morning, look at their phone and see, these are the things that I have. Next was, they didn't have Zoom calls, of course, they had Google Meet. So everything was on Google Meet. I have to do this next, this next, this next. There was no time off. So Google in its wisdom said, Ashdin, we don't want you to do a video thing. Let's turn this into a podcast where people can listen and go out into the, garden and then make a change there and listen to this. So what we did was we identified 5 areas in which habits needed to change. We broke it down into work habits, home habits, relationship or social habits, learning habits, and finally recovery habits. How many of us leave recovery time in the workplace? So it's important to have all these habits in place. And you'll realize this is exactly what we need. Finally, next steps. I've been told I have 2 minutes left. Next steps. Evaluate the problems in your company at a subconscious level. What are people saying and not realizing that they're saying, or doing and not realizing that they're doing? Identify them and think about how you can replace these habits. Don't think about breaking a habit. How can you replace these habits going ahead? Sometimes you need external input, a new pair of eyes, do that. And finally, drop your visiting card and form the habit of winning. So outside there's a bookstore. I've written 3 books on habits. So I'm going to be signing copies and putting them out. Leave your visiting card there. We'll be doing a lucky draw for these books. Thank you so much for coming and listening to the idea of habits and culture, because only if we start changing our habits can we start changing our company. And I keep saying your dream company lies on the other side of the habits that you create today. My name is Ashdin Doctor and I'm known as the Habit Coach. You can find me here. I have a podcast called the Habit Coach Podcast if you all are podcast listeners. Instagram, LinkedIn, of course, and I have 3 best-selling books that are at the bottom. So please read it and then connect with me. Let's take this forward. Thank you so much.